Right, okay. So it is 6 o'clock. Welcome everybody to Thursday Garden Chat. And just want to do a little bit of what's new, what's coming up before we get on to the main event. So we are in the middle of live event season. We've got an event on Monday at NEP with James Hitchmo and Charlie Harper. And in fact, that is actually one ticket left, so if anybody wants to go, they could either email me or we'll get back into the ticket system and try and get that ticket back up on for sale. And then at the end of the month, I'm extremely excited. We have an event at Mien Rouse's garden in Holland, which we've been planning to do for years, and it is actually, there is a centenary of part of the garden at the moment. So we have Julia Crawford, who recently wrote a book about Mien Rouse, and we have Monique, who's the garden director, I suppose is the best way to describe her, and we have a sort of a study day there, so that's going to be wonderful. We also will be visiting John Little up in Essex at the beginning of July, and then two of our events where we're doing a series of events. One is at White House Farm Arboretum, which is in Kent, with the wonderful Maurice Foster. That's an afternoon. And then the other sort of series of events that we're doing is at Surge Hill, at the Plant Library with Tom Stewart Smith and all of the gang up there. So we've got quite a few really interesting live events coming up. So please do have a look at the events diary. And then just to say that it's not our webinar season at the moment. We don't tend to run webinars through the summer months, but if there's lots of recorded webinars in the library on the website, if you'd like to go in and explore and catch up with things. And I know the last couple of days I've been catching up with a few Thursday Garden Chats that I've missed, which are also on our YouTube channel. So there's lots to go at if you want to delve in and find them. Now, this Thursday Garden Chat is a free event that we do for free, and all our speakers come along for free and give up their time. And so if anybody is in a position to donate something towards the running of all of this, that would be wonderful. Helps us keep the wheels going round. But we're always very, very grateful, and it's lovely to have this every week. And of course it goes onto YouTube, the recording, and so again, people can watch it in their own time at different time zones and so on and so forth. And there's probably over 200 hours on the YouTube channel of past talks, which are absolutely brilliant. So I think that's all of our news and views. Noel, I don't think there's anything else that we need to flag up at the moment, so I'm going to pass over to Noel, who's going to introduce tonight's guests.
Well, thank you, Annie. Thank you.
All
right. Tonight, we're going to be looking at a book, a wonderful, truly opulent production by Phaidon, which I feel very privileged to have worked on as one of the consultants and one of the many writers. I'm not going to try and describe it, actually. I think I'll leave that up to our guests. So first of all, Victoria Clarke, commissioning editor at Phaidon, known, of course, for their wonderful art and design books. And over recent years, they've been doing a lot more on gardens and landscape. And then in New York, at the New York Botanic Gardens, we've got Kristine Paulus, who is the collection development librarian, who has played a major role in selecting the images for this book, which must have been a truly wonderful experience, although it probably had its frustrations as well. And finally, Matt Biggs, who was the editor. Matt is a writer, gardener, broadcaster in Britain. And first of all, I'd like you, Victoria, to actually describe this extraordinary book.
Okay, so yes, Matt was our consultant editor, and he worked with myself and a colleague, Lynn. So Garden Exploring the Horticultural World is part of what we call our Explorer series at Phaidon, which began about 10 years ago with the first title, Map. And the books are a series of broad thematic surveys on different topics within the natural sciences for both specialist and general readers. So we take a subject. here, horticulture, and we look at it throughout history and in a sort of cross-disciplinary way. When we're kind of brainstorming ideas for what we're going to do next in this series, this particular subject felt like quite a good logical step, because other titles have included both plant, so botany, and flower, and things like universe, astronomy, etc. And for centuries, gardeners, designers, landscape designers, and other image makers, artists have found inspiration in the garden and the act of gardening. And I think, you know, we basically start by researching the subject from lots of different angles. So garden history, different people, different types and styles and geography. And we compile a long list of almost 1,000 works, actually, which is then sent out to a panel of experts, many of whom are joining me here today. And their feedback is collated and taken into account while we undergo the really tough task of cutting it down to 300. And it's not easy, because putting 600 odd things on the cutting room floor is, you know, you could have them all in. So it's tough. And we, you know, we're doing that with input, you know, like Matt helps, and obviously Kristine and Noel and Ali, but also trying to think about coming at the topic with a global perspective, different periods of history, and kind of allowing people to dip into that subject, whether they be a specialist reader or a more general one. And our advisors always suggest some great things as well. And I know they're going to share some of their picks today. So yeah, that's a kind of a quick run through.
Thank you, Vic. So Matt, this must have been a really interesting challenge. One of the things that immediately struck me about this, and I first came across this book as a whole series of PDFs with lots of little sort of postage stamp images, which I, you know, had to kind of blow up to a certain level of readable pixelation in order to give feedback as a consultant. And I did feel somewhat overwhelmed. But one of the first things that struck me is, you know, what were the boundaries? How would you define what? Presumably, I imagine there's quite a bit of argy-bargy between you and Vic about sorting out what could go in and what perhaps wouldn't.
Yeah, it was interesting, because as far as I was concerned, when I was honoured and invited to do this, I just thought there are no boundaries. Art comes in so many different forms, and there are so many different expressions, that providing me, what I wanted was a variety, a real variety, so that the reader would perhaps look at something and thought, oh goodness, I never thought of that as a piece of art, or I never thought of it as something significant. And what I wanted to do was, yes, certainly put in all the artists that people would know, and the, you know, the style of art, you know, the impressionist, whatever it was. But I also wanted to put things in that were different. So that's why I was absolutely delighted to see, as I scrolled through those small images, things like jewelry, for example, because we don't necessarily think of the craft of jewelry as an artwork. And I wanted people to be surprised and to stop and look and think, as well as see things that they could feel comfortable and familiar with. And this is very much what, you know, Victoria and her team were all about. So I just love the idea. You could sort of pick anything, and there was sort of discussion and sort of some disagreement. But I think the difficult bit, as you can imagine, as Victoria's already said, was sort of saying, you know, you're looking at two famous artists or plans of famous gardens, and you have to decide who's on the list and coming in and who's not.
And I think another thing we thought a lot about is what a garden is, and how that could be as simple as, say, plants in a window box, you know, on a window ledge, and or a grand garden like Versailles, or, you know, so it was trying to kind of explore the many different ways we garden and make gardens. And yeah,
I think that's the other thing that we tend to forget, is that gardening, the wonderful thing about gardening is that it's for everyone. You know, you don't have to have a lot of spare cash, a disposable income to create a garden. And there's some wonderful images of window boxes, for example, with just a few plants in, where people have attempted to garden. But every individual has an idea of what a garden should be. And of course, we're looking at the art, but the first creator, the originator, is the gardener or the garden designer. That's what inspires the artist.
Yeah, so I mean, I think for me, the boundary is probably the canister of Slug Death. I might myself not have included that.
But that's actually good, Noel, because it's challenged you and made you think.
Yes,
that's what art should do, and that's what we want to do.
Yeah.
You also might not have included the Hello Kitty book.
One
of my favorites.
Yes, I shall never forget being in Japan with Dan Pearson at his Millennium Forest project at Takachi, when there was sort of a threat that Hello Kitty might be sponsoring the garden. It was not a pretty sight, and it didn't happen. Again, I think I'm about to draw a line at Hello Kitty, but I love the Barbie. I love the gardener Barbie doll, which is not the lady on the right, I would hasten to add. So, Kristine, what was your role in this, which I suspect was probably a pretty major one and probably really fascinating?
Well, I do think that Victoria and Matthew did the hard work by the time I got on board. So I had it a little bit easier, but yes, it was really hard to narrow down the images. There's just so many great works out there. I helped pare it down, and I tried to make sure that BIPOC voices and those that are generally underrepresented were included in the book. It's quite likely that my North American biases are quite apparent. I gravitated towards images and subjects that have a connection to the New York Botanical Garden. So you'll see that some of the ones that I selected and we'll talk about either were featured in exhibitions here, but almost everything that ended up in the book has some connection to the garden's library's collections. And I work very closely with our collections. So the fact that the book includes books and manuscripts and codices and artworks, everything has some sort of connection to our garden and our library. But it was really hard to narrow it down. And then I also wrote some of the entries too, which was a lot of fun to research and write about them. And I learned so much. It informed the work that I do as well.
Yes, I think we're not just the range here, but also the links. I think in reading the text, you realize that actually what may seem initially very disparate in fact has connections.
That's actually also something that one part of the book is obviously coming up with a list of works, but another huge job is pairing them together, because the way the book is organized, and this often perplexes people at the start, is it's not chronological. Rather, we kind of pair things to create links or interesting juxtapositions, whether that be, and there are some examples in the presentation, but whether it's an old garden and a new version of the same thing, or subtle links between them, or whether they be a visual connection. So that's another. It's a bit like a jigsaw puzzle, getting that to work.
Yes, yes. And then about the end, no doubt you ended up with quite a few kind of oddities that were.
Yeah, we have a list of single pages that we're like, how do we get these in?
Yes. Yeah.
Well, what's also interesting, I think, working on the book, is that even, and I love this, even the cover's absolutely superb. And I gave a talk recently and took one of the books, and it was still sort of ring wrapped. And a chap said to me, he touched the cover and he went, "I'm just going to buy this book on the strength of the cover." He said, "I think it's fantastic." And the great thing I think about that book, from front to back, cover to cover, it's full of creativity and art and inspiration and ideas, so that people can dip in there, they can learn, they can be excited, they can be enthralled. they can be inspired, and all these things make this book come alive and make it a really important work. And it's something that it's enjoyable for them to read. It's not arduous, it's an absolute pleasure. And you can just, it's like a bar of chocolate. You can either sort of break off a little bit and have a nibble and savor it, or you can sort of go into it a little bit more and perhaps a bit greedy.
Eat the whole bar and make yourself sick. Yes.
Yes,
You
I
will
think
never be sick of art.
interesting you say that, because the books obviously were originally kind of conceived for kind of a general readership and making what might be sort of seemingly difficult or tricky topics accessible, but actually they really do appeal to a more specialist reader as well, because I think they kind of throw up new ways of looking at a subject that perhaps, you know, some of my fellow colleagues here, experts, have maybe wouldn't think of, or it's a new way of kind of coming at a subject that maybe they haven't considered before. So the fact that we included Hello Kitty.
Is that range from fine art to kitsch?
Yeah.
Strengthens it. It's something that, you know, we in Western culture have tended to, you know, very much make this separation, and which a lot of other cultures
and history and popular culture, and how the kind of, you know, one of the pictures I've picked to mention later is, you know, just how the simple pleasure of gardening is part of everything, you know, it even comes to us at difficult times. So there's so many different ways you can go into the book.
I think the other thing as well, when you look at the book and the vast horizons it spans, you realise that sort of art and gardening have no boundaries, as Derek Jarman said about his garden, that it had no boundaries. I think it's very easy for us to become snobby about art. I certainly find it very easy, but then we have to realise that it does encompass window boxes and hanging baskets and paintings thereof, and it does encompass here she comes again, Hello Kitty, you know, that it's all included. And I think we tend to set our own parameters, and art and gardening should help us open our minds.
And writing too. Several of the images feature gardens of writers and poets, so it's just all creative types. And I just wanted to say one word about the book, this book as an object. It's important to me as a librarian for books to be beautiful objects, as we frequently put them on display. So this one has been a real eye catcher in our library.
I bet. So Annie is one of the consultants on the book. What was your role, and what we'd be interested to know what you raised as issues perhaps in improving that range of diversity?
Well, I mean, I don't think I raised any massive issues. I think, you know, I got sent the list, and like you described, you know, you're looking at hundreds and hundreds of little pictures and trying to see, that's what the one that's come up at the moment is one of my favorites, having come from Dixter. I mean, this is iconic, you know, Fergus's garden mind map, which we're all saying they should be making into t-shirts at Dixter, because it will make them a fortune if they do that. So that's, you know, that's an absolutely wonderful thing. But no, really it was just looking, was there anything that was left
Sorry
out?
to interrupt, Annie, but I had one of these as a kid in the 1960s.
What, this miniature garden set?
Little plastic miniature garden set. Did anyone else?
Yes, I did actually know.
You did as well. Oh, right. We'll have to have a get together one day.
And then suddenly
I've still got mine. It's in a shoebox somewhere. I'll have to get it.
No, you haven't, have you?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. I think the best I could conjure up would be a fuzzy felt one.
Well, when you dig it out, Noel, I'll come over. Let me know.
Yes.
Be Lego now, wouldn't it?
Yeah.
Lego garden sets.
Yes.
Yeah. No, I think it was just not checking, but just looking through the list, and, you know, was there anything that was missing? And I didn't think there was anything particularly missing. And I also have to just mention that beautiful picture of Frida Kahlo on the left there. I mean, incredible photograph. And I don't envy Victoria and all of the gang having to really make that decision and to do the editing, because, you know, you where on earth do you stop? Or do you just say volume 1 and volume 2 perhaps? I don't know. The next follow-up. But it's and also just looking through them again, I learned a lot, and it opens up that, as Matt's saying, that, you know, that there are no boundaries, you know, art. I think the more books like this, and the more sort of cross-cultural things that we look at that include art and sculpture and textiles and gardens and plants, because to me, you know, it is all of the same thing, really. So I think this is brilliant, and it's to be applauded that it's been brought together in that way. It's wonderful.
It's been quite
Yes, I mean,
interesting as well to know. You talk about, you know, how many images were discarded, and when you have to do this, you go, but only I know, or Victoria, or, you know, what, and a few others know what's been discarded. I know in my years as a gardening TV director, I had to set aside some really lovely gardens, perhaps because the person we wanted to interview wasn't really up to it, or, you know, couldn't be cajoled or encouraged. And I used to go, fantastic garden, what a loss. But I guess only I know it's gone. And I think it was my job and our job, really, our job to sift it through and to make those decisions as we thought best for the reader. You know, you're thinking about the reader and what you're giving to them. You're their servant, really. You're serving them and trying to bring the best that you possibly can to them. So yes, at the end of the day, it's only a few of us who have nightmares about what was left out.
Yeah, I think my memory is that one little secret is that I think those initial sheets had really rather a glut of Persian and Mughal miniatures. First of all, I thought, oh goody, because it's an art form I love, but then there just seemed to be more and more and more of them. In terms
And
of
seed catalogues probably as well.
Yeah, and seed catalogues, which are really seductive. And I did do a book once which relied heavily for illustrations on, you know, copyright-free old seed catalogues. And they're a wonderful, quite addictive thing to collect. Yeah, I mean, in my leafing through these sheets, I mean, I identified as a gap the early 20th century Germany. I mean, Weimar Germany had the most extraordinarily rich and quite argumentative garden culture, and that's one of the ones I'll be mentioning later. I think I felt as, you know, China perhaps didn't do too well, and I think as a result of that, I think I did get a Chinese academic friend of mine involved, and managed to get a lot more Chinese material in there. I think we had to draw a blank on Korea. I think there was some real problems finding Korea. So anyway, so if a missile full of very hot kimchi ever hits the Phaidon offices, it's not my fault. I was impressed going through actually the amount of African-American material. I believe Abra Lee, the historian who we've interviewed quite a few years ago now on Thursday Garden Chat, was a contributor, which kind of makes up for the lack of material from Africa. But Africa does not produce much botanical imagery in its art. In fact, there's an anthropological essay I read once, which is entitled, you know, "Why are there no flowers in African art?"
I think she suggested the Barbie as well.
Oh, did she? Yes.
Yeah,
No,
the gardener.
Black Barbie gardener. So
yes,
great.
that
Yes,
was another great one. And I think Leanne Spencer, or maybe that was you, Kristine, I'm not sure.
I think we both probably picked that one.
Yeah.
So I'm going to now ask you to talk about your favorites, which I need to stop sharing. Annie, could you stop me sharing, please?
Stop sharing. Just okay. Let me just do that. Hang on a sec. Okay. It's not playing the game. Right. View options. Okay. Stop sharing. Okay. No. Okay,
right.
but it's going to your left. Yeah. Okay.
Well, let's find the place to start.
Keep going. Yeah, go back, go back.
Really
There,
nice.
yeah.
All right, so I'll
So,
talk.
yeah,
Oh,
yeah,
go ahead.
this is you, Kristine, is it?
This is, yeah. So I wrote about this one, and if you can see behind me, Roberto Burle Marx was a subject of a 2019 exhibition here at the New York Botanical Garden. It was called Brazilian Modern: The Living Art of Roberto Burle Marx. And it celebrated this influential Brazilian modernist landscape designer, plant explorer, conservationist, and artist. It was one of NYBG's, or maybe the largest botanical exhibition ever here at NYBG.
We hope that you are enjoying this recording from Garden Masterclass's Thursday Garden Chat programme. We started doing this in April 2020 during the first COVID lockdown, when we did it 5 days a week for 2 months, which was a wonderful experience. Since then, we've carried on doing it just for one session a week. We have always done this as a public service. We initially started it as a morale booster for the garden and landscape industry during a very difficult time, and we've so loved doing it that we've carried on doing this. But our presenters give their time for free. We give our time for free. We do incur costs, administrative, technical, and sometimes for support staff, and we would very much appreciate the odd donation to help us keep going and help keep this a free service, which we'd very much like to do. So please go to our homepage, and down at the bottom there's a donate button, and we'll be very grateful. Thank you.
Burle Marx is known for introducing modernist landscape architecture to Brazil. He was one of the first people to call for the conservation of Brazil's rainforests. He was the ultimate plantsman, has more than 50 plant species named for him, bearing the Latinized epithet Burle Marxii in their scientific names. He produced thousands of gardens and landscapes, including the famous curving mosaic walkways at the Copacabana Beach in Rio de Janeiro. Here on the screen, we see a plan for a garden for the residents, a beach house, a California dream beach house of American industrialist Burton Tremaine. Although the house and the garden never actually materialized, this plan is a work of art in and of itself, evidence of Burle Marx's training as a painter. It's rendered in gouache, and we can see the amoeboid shapes that are typical in his designs. He was the first Brazilian landscape artist to depart from the classical principles of garden design, introducing these asymmetrical plans. We see curvilinear paths and planting beds that are punctuated with his stylized star-shaped marks that denote placements of palms and bromeliads, which most likely emphasize native species that he so strongly advocated for. It's just a beautiful work of art, and would have been a beautiful garden had it materialized.
Yeah. It was February 1994, I think. I spent a month based in Rio de Janeiro and stayed at Burle Marx's and met him, although sadly he was very ill by that time. But he was the most extraordinary character. He was famous for his lunch parties, which were he would do the floral arrangements. He had painted the tablecloth. You were in this entire kind of Gesamtkunstwerk of Burle Marx, and certainly in his younger days, he would often sing operatic arias after the meal. A really extraordinary, larger than life character.
It must have been wonderful to experience.
Yeah.
Great. So
And
now,
your next one?
next one is another artist and another garden. So this seems like a familiar story. It's definitely an underlying refrain. Many of Frida Kahlo's paintings prominently feature plants, and many photographs of her show her in her garden or adorned with flowers from her garden, often braided into her hair. She was also the subject of a major exhibition here at the New York Botanical Garden back in 2015. Our horticulturists transformed the Enid A. Haupt Conservatory into an evocation of her garden, including a replica of the facade of her bright blue house, La Casa Azul in Coyoacan, Mexico City. This photograph of Kahlo in her garden at La Casa Azul was taken during the last years of her tragically short life, where she only lived to be 47. It was taken by Giselle Freund, a German-born French photographer who fled Nazi Germany to escape persecution as a Jewish socialist lesbian. Although we don't have enough time to talk at length about her own incredible life and career, she spent 2 years with Kahlo and Diego Rivera, creating a series of vivid, intimate portraits and documenting their daily life, including this one of Kahlo standing in the middle of her garden. The garden features wide paths and densely planted garden beds edged with volcanic rock, you can see here. And as a reflection of her strong interest in Mexican culture, she cultivated native plants, including many cacti species and agave, and also populated her garden with many small pre-Columbian sculptures that you can see here. You can also see dotted throughout the garden a number of Cephalocereus sinalis specimens. It's a threatened cactus species known as old man cactus, so called for its shaggy coat of long white hairs. There's a dramatic yam vine climbing up on the wall behind her, and this reminds me of her painting called Roots, in which her torso opens up and she gives birth to a vine that completely envelops her. We know that she was in a great deal of pain when this was taken, but you can see she has more than a hint of a smile on her face. And you can see that this is her happy place, as was the case with a lot of the artists whose work is featured in this book. And here we have a poet, Anne Spencer. Let's see. This half-acre garden and the home that it's attached to is in Lynchburg, Virginia, and it's an important part of America's cultural landscape. The garden's creator and maintainer, renowned Harlem Renaissance poet Anne Spencer, is pictured here in a photograph by local photographer Jimmy Ray. In addition to being an important poet, she was a civil rights activist, a librarian, very near and dear to me, a feminist, and gardener. The garden was her studio and it was her muse. Her garden was a sanctuary and a place of respite. It was also a salon in which she hosted prominent intellectuals and notable luminaries from the Harlem Renaissance. As you can see from the expression on her face, how much she adored this garden. As her writing career bloomed, her garden expanded, and decades later, after 2 award-winning garden renovations, many of the plants that she planted still remain, including heritage roses, native shrubs like dogwood and juniper that you can see in this photo. There's also peonies and lilies. She's also an avid birder. So you can see there's a very tall purple martin birdhouse. She had bird baths. Also, many of her poems, such as Lines to a Nasturtium and Earth, I Thank You, and God Never Planted a Garden, are love letters to her garden. They also address nature and environmental destruction and disappearing farmlands, some issues that she was very concerned with. She also frequently spoke in her poetry of the challenges of being a Black woman and the incredible hardships that she endured. But she had her sanctuary in the garden.
Great, thank you.
Well, most of you will know, I think, will have heard of Derek Jarman, who was an English artist, filmmaker, costume and stage set designer, a writer, gay rights activist, and thankfully a gardener. He bought this derelict fisherman's hut that became Prospect Cottage while visiting Dungeness in Kent. No, he was actually looking for a bluebell wood. A researcher for one of his films had said, yes, there's a bluebell wood in Kent, and they ended up at Dungeness. Well, there's no bluebell woods there, of course, but he said as they drove through the area, if I find a cottage or a place here for sale, I will buy it. They passed this Victorian fisherman's hut. He bought it as he'd promised, because Tilda Swinton said that he should be true to his word, and he created this wonderful sanctuary of art and imagination, crafting his garden in the boundless, eerie landscape of this shingle beach in the shadow of a nuclear power station. So the location is absolutely extraordinary, and I would urge anyone to go down there to experience the setting, the sense of place that you get when you visit. It was at the peak of his creative powers. He was down to film The Garden, starring Tilda Swinton, who we mentioned already, and he began later, after buying the house and restoring it, creating his celebrated garden on the shingle beach. His garden was made up from found objects. As he walked up and down the beach, he would do that every day. He would collect stones. He was interested in prehistory and alchemy, and that suited the style of the garden with its stones. He was an interesting man and interested. He was experimenting with plants, trying plants from Mediterranean climates, sometimes planting roses. He would improve the soil despite appearances. And the garden gave him a lot of pleasure and solace while he was receiving treatment. The photographer, Howard Suley, and I had the pleasure of meeting him, actually. Victoria very kindly introduced him to me, and it was a bit of a fanboy moment, I have to say. I knew that he had an interesting background and was delighted to discover that Suley grew up as a creative in a coal mining community, listening to Joy Division and reading the music and fashion magazine called The Face, if you remember that. As a child, he was given an Instamatic camera and instantly himself fell in love with taking pictures. He moved to Vancouver, aged 16, and knocked on the door of the city's top photographic studio. And lo and behold, their assistant had just walked out, so he landed his first job. Returning to England, he began a degree in film and photography, spent his spare time watching German expressionist films, and made movies of his mother ironing. And once he was qualified, he tried his luck as a portrait photographer, took his portfolio to Vogue, who immediately sent him to Moscow to take pictures of Rupert Everett. He also developed a plant addiction, beginning with a pot of Lilium regali. And if you know that plant, it's a wonderful white-flowered lily with purple throat and a gorgeous evening fragrance. No wonder he was seduced. So in 1990, the Face sent him to photograph Derek at Prospect Cottage, and for 5 years he became his photographer and gardener. And you can see here the dynamism within the shapes and the forms of the flotsam and jetsam that he picked up, the rusting iron washed onto the beach, remnants of the Second World War. And heat and drought and wind resistance was essential to create a good garden. And I had the good fortune of going there myself quite recently, last November, to interview Johnny Bruce for a radio program that I worked on. And now we were, as many people are, able to go into the house, and it was very exciting to have a cup of Darjeeling in Derek Jarman's kitchen. Also, Johnny Bruce gave me, and I don't know if you can see this stone, but a lot of the stones that Jarman collected were these hagstones with a central hole so that they could be threaded over pieces of metal. So Johnny gave me as a good luck charm hagstone. I also, just as an aside, I've started painting myself, inspired by seeing his work and some circumstances in my life. And if you ever want to paint anything Derek Jarman cottage yellow, the colour is RAL 1021. So I found from Folkestone Council. So that was a really wonderful experience, and I would urge that it should be on everyone's bucket list if you've never had the good fortune to go there before. The area in which it's situated is actually one of the only desert areas in Britain. So let's go on to our next exciting image. And this is one that I dearly love. And it's by an architect called C.F.A. Voisey. Now, Voysey was known as an arts and crafts architect. He incidentally designed Spade House in Sandgate, Kent, for H.G. Wells, and he had a phenomenal talent for design. So he created his houses in this idea of Gesamtkunstwerk, the total work of art. So he designed the interiors, the house themselves, the interiors, the furniture, the fixtures, the fitting, right down to the tiles and the door latches, the complete work of art. So this Garden of Eden, which he painted in the early 20th century, was a textile or wallpaper design that's found in the Victoria and Albert Museum. So Charles Francis Annesley Voysey was a descendant of the Duke of Wellington and the hymn writer Charles Wesley. And when his father, a maverick clergyman, was expelled from the Church of England for heresy, his father simply founded a church of his own. So really, with such a heritage, there's no surprise that his son, richly blessed with independent thought and creativity and influenced by Christianity, would depict his own paradise on earth. In his early years, Voysey's income depended on wallpaper and textile designs like this. And in 1833, he began designing wallpapers for Jeffrey & Co., who produced William Morris's designs before he took the production in-house. And Voysey became so prolific that by 1896, the Studio magazine claimed that Voysey had become to wallpaper what Wellington was to the boot. Now, in this image, unlike Van Bruegel the Elder's famous fauna-filled idyll, Voysey's Eden is filled with delicate wild flowers, which you can see and probably recognise. They're introduced plants and British natives. He sort of eschewed really the traditional apple of temptation for the red fruits of the woody nightshade. And you can spot tulips, bluebells, cornflowers, cowslips, and cyclamen decorating the ground below. Now, this image that he has appears to be immediately after the fall, because you can see Adam and Eve have their backs turned to the tree, and they're leaving paradise. And right in front of them is a rose. Now, I thought, I wonder what this rose is. So, as everyone else does, you immediately email Michael Marriott, who was the rose consultant at David Austin Roses. And he came back with the fact that this sinuous, thorny barrier is Rosa foetida. So with its thorns, its odour, the flailing branches of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, this was all a menacing portent for them as to what was to come. And it's an absolutely delightful image, and you can't help but sit. When you open the book, you just sit there and study and try and pick out the detailing, of which there is so much. And that's another thing that makes this book such an exciting experience to read. Let's go on to the next one, please. Now, gardening is about rebellion. And it's not just guerrilla gardening. It's not just Ron Finley in Los Angeles. And there's a wonderful painting of Ron Finley in the book as well. Absolutely glorious. But I loved this one just because people would look at this and they would be really sniffy about it. And you would go, this is not a garden. You know, this is just a collection of gnomes and a few Father Christmases in there. Total plastic, poor plants, totally lacking in taste. But it's important as a piece of art and important to record this and important as a garden because it is an individual's self-expression. And that's what gardening is all about. The photographer, Peter Marlowe, was a psychology graduate, and he began his career in 1975 on an Italian cruise liner in the Caribbean. He later became a photojournalist and covered conflicts in Lebanon and Northern Ireland, and chronicled the rise of the right wing in his black and white images of the Lewisham race riots. And if you ever have a look at those, there is a website, there is a Marlowe Foundation. Sadly, he died a few years ago. His pictures really capture the atmosphere when extreme right-wing National Front clashed with thousands of demonstrators and police. He also did a long-term study on Liverpool looking out to sea, capturing the bleakness and decline of the people and the infrastructure. Something else where I was really fortunate was when we were looking at the images from this book, a friend and I, who were both interested in photography, said, we were chatting and we said, oh, did you know there's an exhibition up at St Albans Abbey, which is near to where we live? And it was free, so we had to go. And it was the naves of British cathedrals caught in the ethereal light of dawn. And fortunately, and it was only on the journey there that I realised it was a Peter Marlowe exhibition. I said to my pal Dan, you know, this is so exciting because we've got a completely different image in this wonderful gardening art book. And he also liked the quirky, and that's where this study of gnomes and Father Christmases guarding this static caravan in Romney Marsh, Kent, comes into its own. Now, when you think about gnomes, they can be considered to be the working class, and forgive me for using that phrase, but the working class equivalent of classical statuary in an Italianate garden. They're guarding just these two cultivated plants and a weed accompanied by a cherub, the donkeys, and that wonderful sign of singular vulgarity, which welcomes then and asks them to leave. So this is gardening to me as an act of rebellion. And if you look at the Phrygian caps that were worn by the gnomes, they were the liberty caps from the French Revolution that came to signify freedom and the pursuit of liberty, both in the American Revolution and in the French Revolution. So the garden itself is a revolutionary statement. And I think the image captures Margaret's spirit of humour and her rebellion and her underlying message to all gardeners. You don't have to conform. You can cultivate your own garden the way you want to. Express yourself. Be who you are. Do what you want to do. And if people don't like it, to put it politely, stuff them. And in doing so, she also wants to make you smile. Thank you.
Thank you, Matt. So we've got here a catalogue from the Karl Förster Staudengärtnerei. Karl Förster was a gardener whose, in fact, this year is the 150th anniversary of his birth, and to celebrate that, there's an exhibition in Potsdam, just outside Berlin, in the town hall in Potsdam, and various celebrations for a man who was extraordinarily influential. Förster was a nurseryman, a plant breeder, a writer of great eloquence, and also at times a radio broadcaster. It's difficult for us now to really imagine just how important Förster was as a cultural figure. He was right up there with leading artists and writers and musicians during the Weimar period, which was a period of history which has a bad reputation from the horrendous inflation, the rise of the Nazis, and much else. But it was also one of those times of really quite extraordinary creativity, not just in the arts, but also in architecture and the whole business of questioning how people live. And a central concern of the times was the relationship between people and nature and countryside, and in particular gardens. So Förster was very much campaigning for garden spaces, for quality planting in public spaces, and for high quality plants to be bred, trialed, and made available to the public. His nursery was started around about the time just before the First World War. He continued. In fact, it effectively continues today. It has been a remarkable survivor. Förster was this major cultural figure, but he had two brothers, one of whom, his elder brother, Friedrich, was basically the leading anti-Nazi intellectual, a philosopher who eventually, in the late 1930s, was forced to leave the country and indeed never returned to Germany. Karl Förster himself, although very much a political liberal, was something of a regime toady under both the Nazis and the communist regime that succeeded in East Germany. This year was published a very thorough new biography of Förster, which goes meticulously year by year through his diaries and all the information available about his movements. And it's quite clear that he is somebody who he may have been a political liberal, but he never used his status to stand up to the Nazi regime. He is one of the few people who probably could have done so and gotten away with it. And the fact that he didn't do so has cast a little bit of a pall over this year's celebrations. Somewhat surprisingly, following the takeover of Eastern Germany by the Soviet Union and the formation of the German Democratic Republic, Förster, with remarkable speed, found himself very close to the East German leadership. East Germany always recognized the importance of culture in the general political mix. And certainly throughout the 1950s, Förster on many occasions personally met Walter Ulbricht and the rest of the leadership of the East German Communist Party. He died in 1970, and after the changes, the fall of the Berlin Wall, the nursery was rescued, the house and garden he created was then restored by the Karl Förster Foundation. And today it makes a nice day trip out of Berlin to Potsdam to go and visit. So one of the really great figures of 20th century gardening. One of the interesting things about this book, and indeed about discussion of gardens generally, is, you know, what is a garden and what isn't. We could argue that, in fact, since the human race so dominates the world, maybe all of the world is a garden. Much of it, of course, we could argue is very badly gardened. But this idea that in managing semi-natural environments, we are in some way gardening, I think is what to wonderful expression in this Australian Aboriginal painting. So the Aborigines, whose lifestyle is so utterly different to ours, at a very basic hunter-gatherer level, in fact, massively transformed the Australian landscape. Arriving several tens of thousands of years ago, we don't quite know how many, they basically over several thousand years destroyed the original largely coniferous forest, and with a result, essentially using fire for game management. So the result was essentially a eucalyptus, a much more fire mediated landscape, which was managed very successfully for game. And this painting is very much about this gardened landscape. And indeed, the recent very destructive fires in Australia, one of the aggravating factors is that over much of Australia, this Aboriginal land management is no longer practiced. So it's a land management that essentially uses fire, little and often, and very, very well understood to create the kind of conditions which are ideal for game and for the hunter-gatherer lifestyle. So this is a rather lovely illustration of, I think, one of the sort of borderline philosophical concepts of this book is defining what a garden is, and perhaps looking at this idea of the world as potentially a gardened space, and that perhaps if we thought about it as a garden space, we would actually, as a species, take greater care of it. There are several rather marvelous photographs in the book of allotment, what we in England would call allotment gardens. Americans would call them community gardens. Rented spaces where people, very often people who do not live in a house with a garden, grow vegetables or flowers. And I think this is a wonderful celebration of British working class floriculture. Britain has, as indeed several other European countries have quite a rich tradition of working class gardening. Very much in the case of Britain, very much going back to the florists who originally were refugee Protestant weavers coming from what is now Belgium and Holland. And that tradition of growing particular flowers to perfection then matured in the early 20th century into a culture around growing the perfect delphiniums, sweet peas, chrysanthemums, things that could be raised easily on a small patch of land alongside vegetables. And I just love this picture of this, the joy that this man is expressing in his chrysanthemums, a flower which has been, distinctly out of fashion for some time now, although I gather it's coming back into fashion. So I think finally over to you, Vic, as editor.
Sure. I'll be quick with mine, although Annie's probably a better place to talk about this one than me, but we had a lot of plans in the book. And actually there are a lot of plans that didn't make it into the book. So I absolutely love a garden plan. This is one of the Donald Poole garden at El Novellero by American landscape architect Thomas Church. And it is probably, it shows probably one of the most iconic or famous swimming pools in garden history ever. The swimming pool with its sculpture in the middle, and around the edge there's sort of concrete surfacing with decking around the trunks of oak trees and sculptural rocks positioned. But the design encapsulates Church's belief that a garden should have no beginning and no end, and should be pleasing when seen from any angle, not only from the house. Flowing spaces and how it meets the functional needs of the client. It also encapsulates other design essentials that were typical of Church, the importance of the natural setting and the siting of the design within it, and the belief that gardens were places to live in rather than just homes for plants. And my next one is a photograph by the American 20th century photographer Dorothea Lange. And I was just really struck by this and how she was hired by the US government to document, among other things, the forced relocation of Japanese Americans to detention camps in the aftermath of the attack on Pearl Harbor. And she accepted the commission with the conviction that she could approach it from a sort of truthful rather than a propagandistic representation of a historical moment. And obviously life in the camps was not good and was very difficult, but I just love the fact that Mrs. Fujita here is seen tending her simple little tiny vegetable garden, and not only, I guess that provided, key sustenance, but also presumably was a real source of joy in difficult times. And I just love that. And then last but not least, I guess when gardeners cannot garden, we're all rather obsessed with seed catalogues. And I remember coming across this one on I went to the Garden Museum when we were searching for this book and picked out quite a few of their treasures to include. And I just love these. And the kind of, I guess they also appealed to me because of the book element, being a bookmaker, and the kind of montage, collage of the different elements, drawings, and then the writing. So yeah, it's it's Elphick and Sons, I think late 19th century, but bit partial to these. So yeah, those are my top three. Difficult to choose just three.
Great. Well, thank you. Thank you for your sharing all your favourite images from this wonderful book, which will give many hours of sort of dipping in, reading and learning pleasure. So thank you, everybody. And
don't forget, Noel, that friends and members of Garden Masterclass can get this book
at 20% discount.
That's right, on our
yes,
retail
it's
page.
all on the members retail page, because I put it up there today.
Yeah.
And we'll be reminding you of that fact in the on the YouTube video when we put that up at the weekend.
Yeah, definitely.
Could I just say, to everyone who's attended this evening, thank you very much indeed for your time. Thank you for listening. Hope you've enjoyed it. Do buy the book. 20%. Oh my goodness me.
Yeah.
Projects I've ever worked on, and I loved every minute. And I still enjoy dipping into it now. So that's a totally biased recommendation of the publication.
You're allowed to do that, Matt. You're allowed.
It's a great achievement.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thank you for having us.
Thank you, everybody.
Yeah,
thanks a
wonderful.
lot.
Thanks a lot, everybody. Bye. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
We hope that you are enjoying this recording from Garden Masterclass's Thursday Garden Chat programme. We started doing this in April 2020 during the first COVID lockdown, when we did it 5 days a week for 2 months, which was a wonderful experience. Since then, we've carried on doing it just for one session a week. We have always done this as a public service. We initially started it as a morale booster for the garden and landscape industry during a very difficult time, and we've so loved doing it that we've carried on doing this. But our presenters give their time for free. We give our time for free. We do incur costs, administrative, technical, and sometimes for support staff, and we would very much appreciate the odd donation to help us keep going and help keep this a free service, which we'd very much like to do. So please go to our homepage, and down at the bottom there's a donate button, and we'll be very grateful. Thank you.